The fancy main room was full of bright diamonds and mean-looking smiles. For Emily Scott, it felt like a strange, unfriendly planet. She held her small, old purse like a shield, feeling the looks from 100 judging eyes on her simple, store-bought dress. The bride was her oldest friend, a girl from her neighborhood who had married into this very rich world, and she had really wanted Emily to come. But now, standing alone by a huge flower display, Emily felt less like a guest and more like a science project that failed. Across the room, Dr. Henry Montgomery felt stuck in a different way. He was trapped by his mother, a powerful older woman in fancy clothes, who was pointing quickly toward a young woman with a blank smile and a lot of money in cloth. "She's perfect." "Henry," his mother whispered under the sound of the string band. "Her family has been spending summers in the Hamptons for 5 generations. It's time you married someone suitable." Henry felt very stressed. Since his awful divorce, his mother's attempts to find him a wife had gotten stronger and stronger. He felt like a valuable horse being shown off for sale. His eyes quickly looked over the room, searching for an escape. And then he saw her. He saw a girl across the room who looked just as stuck as he felt. She was beautiful in a quiet, modest way with smart eyes that were now filled with anger and resistance. He watched as a rude man in a tuxedo, smelling strongly of alcohol and acting stuck up, trapped her. "I don't think we've met," the man spoke slowly, looking at Emily like she was something to pick from a list. "You must work for the food service. Could you bring me another scotch?" The mean words felt like she was being shamed in front of everyone. Emily's face turned red, her fingers white as she held her purse tightly. She was about to turn and run away, her self-respect ruined. And right then, Henry saw his opportunity. It was a quick, sudden idea, coming from his own desperate state and a sudden, strange need to save the girl with the resisting eyes. He left his mother with a short nod, interrupting her mid-sentence, and walked across the room like a doctor going quickly into an emergency. The people moved out of his way. He didn't stop until he was standing right next to Emily. He totally ignored the rude guest, focused only on her. He leaned in, his voice a low, secret whisper that was just for her, like sharing a secret in a room full of people they didn't know. "Pretend to be my wife." Emily looked at him closely, her mind spinning. It was Dr. Henry Montgomery, the super-rich brain surgeon, a man she had only ever seen in magazines. "What?" she breathed. "Go with it," he whispered, his eyes shining with a risky, exciting light. "I'll make sure you get something good out of this." Before she could argue, he took her hand, holding it warmly and strongly. He turned to face his shocked mother and the young woman coming closer, pulling Emily softly to his side. "Mother," he said, his voice very smooth and loud enough for only the people close by to hear. "I'd like you to finally meet my wife, Emily. We wanted to keep it a secret a little longer, but I guess now is the best time." A quick, surprised sound went through the people right next to them. The rude man who had insulted her stared, his mouth hanging open. Henry's mother looked like she had just been hit by lightning. Henry smiled, a bright, attractive smile that was completely fake. He brought Emily's hand to his mouth and kissed her fingers, his eyes never looking away from hers. "Darling," he said, his voice soft and loving. "I think they are playing our song." For the rest of the night, they acted like a real couple that everyone believed. He never left her side, his hand always on her back, a way of showing they belonged together that gave her chills. He whispered smart, funny things in her ear that made her laugh, a real, true laugh that surprised both of them. They danced, and in his arms she felt safe and like she belonged, which was a wonderful, dizzying feeling. The spark between them was a strong electric feeling, making them feel confused and excited at the same time. At the end of the night, he walked her to the hotel's big front door, away from the people watching them. The pretend game was finished. "You were believable," he said, his voice back to his cool, businesslike tone, though his eyes still held a little bit of the warmth from the night. "You're not a bad actor yourself." "Doctor," she answered, her heart still beating fast. He reached into his jacket and gave her a thin black business card. "I'll call you," he said, and with that, he turned and went into a waiting black car, leaving her standing on the edge of the sidewalk. The cool night air was very different from the heat that still stayed on her skin where he had touched her. She looked down at the card in her hand, her mind spinning. What on earth had just happened? Hey, before we move on to the next part, I want to say a special hello to our great listeners who are always here on the channel. Elizabeth from South Africa, Carolyn from the Pacific Northwest, and Marion from London. Thank you for always doing things here. And what about you? Where are you listening from right now? Write it in the comments, and maybe in the next story your name will be mentioned too. Let's keep going. The week after the wedding, Emily went back to the tough, ordinary truth of her life. The memory of the sparkling room and Henry's hand on her back felt like a confusing dream when you're sick. She worked 2 shifts in a row at the diner. The smell of cooking oil and old coffee was very different from the memory of fancy drink and his expensive perfume. Her mother got sicker, and a new, scary pile of hospital bills had arrived. Each bill was a paper monster trying to eat up the little bit of money they still had. She was busy during lunchtime, holding a tray of plates when the diner suddenly became quiet. It was the same thing she had seen at the wedding, the sudden quiet that told everyone he was here. Dr. Henry Montgomery stood in the doorway, dressed in a dark, perfectly fitting suit that made him look like a king who had walked into a poor person's small house. His eyes looked over the room, going past the amazed customers and focused right on her. He walked to the counter, and his energy was so strong it seemed to push the air around him. "Miss Scott," he said, his voice a low, calm order that was louder than the noise of the diner. He waited while she gave her tray to a surprised co-worker, then took her to a quiet table in the corner. He didn't waste time talking about nothing. "I took the freedom to check into your situation," he began, his voice quick and businesslike. This was a cold way of showing how much power he had. "Your mother's serious heart problem, the growing debt from her last times in the hospital, your 2 jobs, which are still not enough to pay for the medicine she needs." He explained the sad truth of her life as if he were reading notes about a sick person. Emily felt shame and anger rushing over her. He was picking apart how desperate she was. "I am suggesting an official deal," he continued, his gray eyes strong and thoughtful. "A 1-year paper agreement. You will act as my wife in public. You will go to business and social parties. You will keep up the fake idea we started at the wedding." He stopped, letting his next words be important. "In exchange, I will pay all of your family's bills right away. Also, your mother will be moved to a private room at Montgomery General. She will be looked after by the best heart doctors in the country. Every test, every operation, every medicine, all of it will be paid for. She will have everything she needs." It was a miracle. A rope thrown into the rough, dark water that was about to pull her down. It was everything she had wished for. But she knew, with a horrible certainty, that there was a trick. A man like Henry Montgomery did nothing without a reason, without a safety plan. "Why?" she asked, her voice very quiet. "Why me?" "You are practical," he stated simply. "You are smart, calm when things are hard, and you have a clear, strong reason to finish this agreement. You are a known factor in an otherwise crazy world." He leaned forward a little bit. "And because my last marriage taught me something important, love is a danger. Feelings are a factor I will not allow again." He slid a smooth, very thin tablet across the table. "The agreement is all here." Her hands shook as she took it. She scrolled through the thick legal writing, the agreements to keep secrets, the schedule for public parties, and then she saw it, Article 11. The title was clear and scary. "The rule for ending the deal if feelings start." She read it, feeling cold inside. The rule said, in clear, certain legal words, that the agreement depended on the relationship staying just a business performance. If one person were to start having real loving feelings or emotional attachment for the other, they legally had to tell those feelings right away. As soon as they told the truth, the agreement would end right away. All future money help, including the continuing hospital care, would stop. It was a trick, a perfectly built, evil trick. He had made a game where the only way to win was to not tell the truth. But he, a man who hated lies, had made telling the truth a requirement. If she fell in love with him and was honest, she would lose everything. If she fell in love with him and lied, she would become the one thing he hated. This can't be real, she breathed, looking up at him, her heart beating fast. It's a punishment for having feelings. It's a safety rule, he corrected, his voice as cold and sharp as a doctor's knife. I do not deal with emotional factors, Miss Scott. This is a business deal. My rules are final. She looked at his face, which showed nothing but calm, separate control. Then she thought of her mother, of her tired, worried face, of the growing bills that kept her awake at night. She had no choice. She was stuck between two bad options. And one bad option was a huge pile of bills, and the other bad option was this impossible cold man. With a shaking finger, she touched the signature spot on the tablet. Her name showed up in clean electronic writing. The word accepted lit up on the screen. She felt a deep, chilling coldness inside. She had just said yes to the rules of the most dangerous game of her life, a game where the cost of loving him was losing everything. Moving to Henry's huge apartment was a strange, unreal experience. One day, Emily was living in a small, packed apartment that smelled of her mother's special tea. The next, she was living in a silent, plain fortress of glass and steel that floated above the city like a modern mountain where the Greek gods lived. Henry met her not at the door, but in the huge living room. His stance was as serious and stiff as the building design around him. "Welcome, Miss Scott," he said, his voice showing no real welcome. "Your rooms are in the east side. I will show you." He led her down a long white hallway to a set of rooms that were bigger than her whole old apartment. They were beautiful, very fancy, and completely cold. "My own rooms are in the west wing," he said, stopping at her door. A clear physical distance helps keep feelings clear. Remember the rule. The reminder felt like a slap, a cold splash of water to make sure she never forgot the rules of their deal. Her first official job as Mrs. Montgomery was a dinner to raise money for the hospital. Held just 2 nights later, the change was amazing. A team of experts called by Henry came to her, with expensive dresses, diamond jewels and makeup kits. They shaped her into a new person, a fancy lady she didn't know in the mirror. When she came out, Henry was waiting. He was dressed in a perfect tuxedo, looking unbelievably good. He looked her up and down, his gray eyes making a careful doctor-like judgment from head to toe. "Acceptable," he said. The single word of agreement was given with the warmth of a science paper. But as he walked her to the car, his hand resting on her back, she felt a slight shake in his fingers. The touch, meant to be seen by his driver, was a shock of electricity that showed his calm mask was breaking. At the party, he was a great actor. He was the loving, attractive husband, his hand always holding her tightly. His smile bright, he would lean in to whisper a smart, funny thought in her ear, his breath warm on her skin, making her shake. He would touch her arm, her shoulder, her hand. Each touch was a perfect part of the show, yet each one sent a confusing, exciting shock through her. Their acting was perfect, so real that even they seemed to forget it wasn't true. The hardest moment came when his mother walked up, her eyes sharp and judging. "Well, Henry," she said, her look moving quickly over Emily. "You certainly have lots of surprises." "Emily is the best surprise of my life," Henry replied smoothly, pulling Emily closer and giving her a soft, slow kiss on the cheek. The movement was for his mother to see, a public showing of love. But his lips were warm, his touch soft, and for a very short time, Emily's eyes closed quickly. She felt something, a real certain spark, and she knew with a scary certainty that he had felt it. 2. The ride back to the apartment was heavy with a new, quiet stress. The air felt charged with the memory of that almost loving moment. They stood in the silent living room, the city lights sparkling below them. "You acted well tonight," Henry said, his voice tight. He wouldn't look at her. "You too," she answered, her voice very quiet. A heavy silence came between them. They were both thinking the same thing. The kiss on the cheek, the way she had moved closer to his touch, the look in his eyes when he moved away. It had felt too real. He cleared his throat, taking a step back, making sure there was physical space between them again. "Good night, Emily," he said suddenly, his voice once again cool and businesslike. He turned and went back to the safe side of the apartment that was his. "Good night, Henry," she whispered to the empty room. The act of pretending nothing happened had started. They had both felt the first dangerous spark of real feeling. And they both knew, with a cold, scary certainty, that admitting it, even to themselves, would mean the end of the deal they both needed so much. The game had just become much, much more dangerous. The stress of her new secret life, the constant acting, the worrying fear of keeping the agreement. The fast changes in Henry's behavior started to wear her out. A week after the dinner, Emily woke up with a sore throat and a small headache. She decided it was just tiredness, taking a couple of pills and putting a bright smile on her face. She had a full day of work, including going with Henry to a lunch with the hospital's main directors. She couldn't let herself look weak. By noon, however, the headache was a painful beat behind her eyes and a cold, sick feeling had started to sneak into her body. She felt dizzy and weak, but she kept going, her self-respect refusing to let her stop. They were standing in the party before the main event when it happened. She was listening to the leader talk boringly about plans to make the hospital bigger when the room suddenly spun, and the sides of her sight went dark. She rocked on her feet, reaching out a hand to hold herself up against a table close by. Henry, who had been talking seriously across the room, saw it right away. His head lifted fast, his doctor's gaze focusing on her with sharp attention. He saw her light face, the small shake in her hand, the shine of sweat on her forehead. In a move that shocked everyone in the room, he suddenly stopped the person he was talking to, walked quickly across the room, and took her arm. "Excuse us," he said to the confused leader, his voice a low, strong order. "My wife is not feeling well." "We're leaving." He didn't wait for an answer. He led her out of the room, his hand a strong, helpful presence on her back, ignoring the whispers and stares that followed them. "I'm fine," she argued softly in the elevator. "I just felt a little dizzy." "You're not fine," he disagreed, his voice leaving no way for her to argue. He put the back of his hand against her forehead, his touch surprisingly soft. "You have a fever. You're going home, and you're going to bed." It was an order given with the full strength of his power as both her agreed-upon husband and a doctor. Back at the apartment, he didn't just send her to her room. He followed her, his worry obvious. "Get into bed," he ordered. "I'll be right back." He came back a few minutes later with a thermometer, medicine, and a glass of water. He took her temperature quickly and expertly, his face serious as he read the number. 102, it's the flu, he figured out. "You've been working too hard." For the rest of the day, he became her unwilling, very skilled nurse. He cancelled all of his afternoon operations, a move she knew almost never happened. He brought her soup, which he had apparently forced his own cook to make right then. He made sure she drank enough water, that she took her medicine on time. He was quick and short in his manner like a doctor, but what he did showed more than what he said. His worry was something you could almost touch in the room. That night, the fever went up quickly. She kept sleeping and waking in a hot, troubled sleep, bothered by confusing dreams. At one point, she felt a cool hand on her forehead and made a soft, sick sound while half asleep. "Shh, it's all right," a low voice whispered from the dark. "Just the fever." She opened her eyes slightly to see Henry sitting in the chair next to her bed, a small lamp making long shadows on his face. He was watching her, his feelings easy to see in the dark. "You're still here," she said quietly, her voice heavy with sleep. "I'm here," he said back softly. He reached out to check her temperature again, his hand cool and steady on her hot skin. As his hand rested on her forehead, his thumb slowly, without thinking, rubbed her temple. It was a simple, calming movement, an act of true, unplanned softness. It was not what a doctor does with a patient or a man doing a business deal. It was a real act of caring. He seemed to understand what he was doing at the same time she did. He pulled his hand back quickly as if he had been burned, a look of shock and anger at himself showing on his face. He stared at his own hand, then at her, his mouth tight with sudden strong annoyance, an annoyance aimed completely at himself. He had broken his most important rule. He had let a factor of feeling enter the situation, without saying anything else. He stood up and walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the dark, her skin still buzzing from the memory of his touch. He was scared. She realized not of her or the sickness, but of the sure, scary truth that his own heart was giving away his secrets. After Emily got better from the flu, a new shaky stress stayed between them. Henry's act of caring and his fast, scared running away after had been a quiet admission. They both knew he had felt something, and they both knew they couldn't talk about it. They moved carefully around each other, their talks too polite, their actions extremely businesslike, each of them trying hard to rebuild the falling walls of their agreement. The world, however, seemed to have other plans. "We have to go to Florence," Henry said one evening, his voice short, his eyes stuck on a folder he was reading. "Florence?" Emily asked, surprised. "There's a meeting for brain doctors at the Cargi University Hospital," he explained, still not looking at her. "I'm the main speaker. As my loving wife, you are expected to be there. We leave Friday." The thought of being stuck with him for 3 days in the most romantic city in the world was both scary and exciting. Florence was a dream. But for Emily and Henry, it was a beautiful, sun-covered room of torture. To keep up their public look, they had to constantly pretend to be close in a way that felt dangerously real. They had to share a set of rooms with separate bedrooms, of course, but a shared living area. They had to walk arm in arm through the rough stone streets, smiling for pictures for the hospital's internet team who were recording the trip. On their first afternoon, they were told to take some loving pictures for the hospital's paper. They found themselves standing on the Ponte Vecchio bridge, a skilled photographer telling them what to do. "Closer," the photographer yelled. "Dr. Montgomery, put your arm around her." Mrs. Montgomery laughed. "Look at him like you love him very much." Henry's arm felt like a hot iron mark around her waist. Emily forced a laugh, tipping her head back to look at him, and was shocked by the look in his eyes. He was looking down at her, not with the cool distance of a work partner, but with a deep, honest feeling that made her stop breathing. "Perfect," the photographer shouted. Later, they bought ice cream and sat on the steps of a plaza, the warm Italian sun on their faces. For a moment, they forgot they were acting. They really talked about the artwork, the past, the beauty of the city. He told her about a summer he had spent here as a student doctor, and she told him about her dream of one day drawing the Duomo. They laughed at a joke he made. A real laugh they shared that sounded around the sunny square. It was easy. It was normal. It was scary. The moment things almost fell apart came on their last night. After the big meeting's fancy dinner, they decided to walk back to the hotel, the air warm and smelling of flowers. They walked slowly through the quiet, turning streets, their footsteps making sounds on the old stones. They found a small, hidden plaza where one person was playing a violin, making a beautiful, sad love song. A few other couples were spread out listening, holding each other close. Henry and Emily stopped, pulled in by the music. They stood there in the soft light of the street lamps, not talking, just listening. The music grew louder, a song of wanting and love, and it seemed to fill the space between them, saying everything they couldn't say. In the middle of the small crowd under the Italian moon, he turned to look at her. The world around them seemed to disappear. There were no cameras, no co-workers, no agreement. There was only the music, the moonlight, and the clear truth in his eyes. He saw her. Not Miss Scott, his wife for the business deal, not the woman from the diner. He saw Emily, and she saw him, not the super-rich surgeon, but Henry, the man who had taken care of her when she was sick, the man who had laughed with her over ice cream. Slowly, certainly, he began to lean closer. The strong feeling in his eyes was a clear, plain admission. His lips were very close to hers. This was it, the moment the big feelings had stopped before, the moment they had both been afraid of and secretly wanting, the kiss that would stop everything, and then, at the exact same time, they both quickly pulled back as if they had been hit by electricity. Fear quickly appeared in their eyes. The shared, scary understanding of what they had almost done. They had almost broken the agreement. They had almost picked a moment of honesty instead of a year of safety. "It's getting late," he said, his voice tight, a rough sound in the quiet plaza. "Yes." "We should go," she answered, her own voice a fast whisper. They turned and walked back to the hotel in a heavy, rushed quiet, a full foot of space between them. Each was stuck in their own private fear, shocked not by the rules of their agreement made by a person, but by the certain unstoppable laws of their own hearts. Are you enjoying this story? Don't forget to click subscribe and help us grow. Thank you for being here. The flight back from Florence was a picture of quiet, painful stress. Henry and Emily sat next to each other, a big gap of unsaid words between them. The almost kiss in the plaza had broken their shaky peace. Pretending nothing happened was not possible anymore. They both knew the truth, and that knowledge was a dangerous, explosive thing that threatened to burst at any moment. They returned to the apartment and to their separate sides. The physical space was a helpful, but not enough, shield. They stayed away from each other for 2 days, only talking through their formal business text messages. The bursting came not from inside, but from the outside world. On the 3rd day, Emily was moving through the news stories on her tablet when a title made her blood feel cold. The Ice King's Breakdown, My Life with Dr. Heartless by Catherine Sterling. It was a private part taken from the tell-all life story of Henry's ex-wife. With a shaking hand, Emily clicked the link. The story was a perfect way to try and destroy his reputation. Catherine described Henry not just as a husband who didn't care, but as a cold, unfeeling monster. She changed his focus on his work into a sick obsession, his need to be alone into a scary secretiveness, his quiet way into a cruel lack of emotion. She listed fake fights, changed private times into public complaints, and showed herself as the loving victim who suffered for a long time because of a man who couldn't feel human emotion. The story spread very fast. The comments area was full of mean, hateful words aimed at Henry. Crazy person. Someone who loves himself too much. He saves lives but destroys them at home. Emily felt a fierce, hot anger build in her chest. It was a lie, all of it. The man she described was a fake picture, a bad guy from a cheap book. He was not the man who had laughed with her in Florence, or the man who had softly placed a cool cloth on her forehead in the middle of the night. She found Henry in his office. The room was dark, except for the light of the city outside the huge window. He was standing by the bar, a half-empty bottle of liquor on the counter, a glass in his hand. He was staring out into the darkness, standing very stiffly with a pain that you could almost feel in the room. "Henry," she said softly from the door. He didn't turn. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and rough. "Go to your room." "I read the article," she said, ignoring his order and walking further into the room. "It's all lies." He let out a quick, sad laugh. "Is it a cold, unfeeling man who uses agreements to handle his relationships? Sounds pretty correct, doesn't it?" "No," she said, her voice strong. She walked over to him and softly took the glass of liquor from his hand, putting it on the counter. "She doesn't deserve your pain, Henry. She's not worth worrying about." He finally turned to look at her, and the deep, open pain in his eyes made her heart hurt. The carefully built walls of the super-rich surgeon had broken, leaving only a man who was very, very injured. "And what do you know about this?" he asked, his voice full of sadness and self-hatred. "What do you know about what I deserve?" "I know," she said, her voice becoming softer, her eyes looking straight into his, "that the man she describes in that article is not the man who took care of me when I was sick. He's not the man who made me laugh in a plaza in Florence. He's not the man I see right now." Her strong, surprising loyalty, her solid protection of him when he was doubting himself, was the one thing he was not ready for. It broke through the last of his shields, the pain, the shame, the loneliness. It all came together into one desperate, powerful need. With a deep, sad sound that came from the bottom of his heart, he pulled her to him. His hands got caught in her hair, his mouth rushing down onto hers. It was not a soft or tempting kiss. It was a kiss of desperation, of hunger. It was the kiss of a man drowning who holds on to the only thing that can save him. It was rough, hungry, and completely taking over. A desperate try to wipe out the pain of the past with the clear, amazing truth of the present time. Emily met his desperation with her own. her arms wrapping around his neck, her body softening against his. This was it, the truth, the certain, huge, beautiful truth. The kiss finally stopped. They pulled away, breathing hard, their foreheads resting against each other. They stared into each other's eyes, the air buzzing with the feeling that came after what they had just done. The terrible understanding of what they had done hit them both at the same moment. They had just, in the clearest way possible, broken the agreement. It was over. The quiet in the office was complete, broken only by their rough breathing. The kiss had been a confession, an acceptance of everything they had been fighting so hard to deny. The game was finished. The rules were broken. Henry was the first to pull away, stepping back as if someone had hit him. He stared at her, his face showing complete fear and self-hatred. He looked at his own hands as if they had worked against him. "I kissed you," he said, his voice empty, missing all feeling. He was a doctor figuring out a deadly injury. I felt closeness. He walked over to his desk, his movements stiff, like a robot. He was no longer the loving, desperate man who had kissed her. He was Dr. Henry Montgomery, the man of reason, the man of rules. And he was about to make sure the most painful rule he had ever written was followed. "According to Rule 11 of our agreement," he read out loud, the words sounding like a punishment of death. "The agreement is now ended." He sat down in his chair, his back very straight, and began typing on his computer. He was getting the papers ready for the final money transfer and the ending of the deal. He was following his own set of steps, even though it was clearly hurting him badly. He was cutting off the arm to save the body, cutting her out of his life to keep the cold, empty order he had built around himself. Emily watched him, her heart breaking into tiny pieces. He was going to do it. He was really going to let her leave, to push her away, all because of a silly, impossible rule he had made to protect a heart that was already clearly broken. A fire made of love and a strong, desperate anger started in her heart. She would not let him do this. She would not let him hide behind his own walls. "Wait," she said, her voice shaking but strong. He didn't look up from his screen. "The rules are clear, Emily. I broke the rule. The results happen automatically." "Then you're silly," she quickly replied, walking to his desk and standing in front of him, making him look at her. He finally lifted his eyes, and the pain in them was so deep it made her gasp. "If we're going to be honest," she said, her voice sounding with a new strength. "If we're going to use the one rule that asks for the truth, then let's be completely honest." She took a deep, calming breath. "You weren't the only one who broke the agreement, Henry," she admitted, her eyes steady. "I broke it too, weeks ago. Maybe even the first night at the wedding. I fell in love with you. I am in love with you." Her admission stayed in the air, an amazing, beautiful countermove. He stared at her, completely unable to speak. He had gotten ready for every possibility, every factor, except this one. The impossible rule had created an impossible stuck place. He had broken the rule, so he had to end the agreement. But she had broken it too. If they were both guilty of breaking it, who had the right to force the punishment? The very rule that was made to keep them separate now tied them together in their shared, mutual guilt. "So what now, Henry?" she asked softly, a dare in her eyes. "You can't fire me for breaking a rule you broke yourself. You can't punish me for something you also should be punished for. Your perfect, reasonable, feeling-proof agreement, it has a way out." He looked from her resisting, loving face to the ending papers on his screen. His whole world, a world built on rules and control, had just been flipped over by the one factor he had refused to allow. He was very smart, a master of reason. But at that moment, facing the beautiful, unreasonable, and certain truth of their shared love, he had absolutely no idea what to do. The shared admission left them stuck in an impossible state of waiting. The agreement was broken, but it couldn't be carried out. They were tied together by the very rule that should have separated them. The air in the apartment, once filled with quiet stress, was now heavy with a painful truth they had spoken, a truth they didn't know how to handle. They spent the next 2 days like ghosts in the huge apartment, staying away from each other, lost in their own mixed-up thoughts, the base of their relationship. The agreement was gone, and they were falling freely without a safety net. Finally, it was Emily who broke the quiet. She found Henry in his office, staring out the window, looking just as lost as she felt. "I have to leave," she said, her voice quiet but strong. "I can't stay here like this, Henry. Not in this uncertain place. The agreement is broken. The reason I'm here is gone. I need to think. I need space." He turned to face her, his look marked with a pain that was just like hers. He wanted to fight it, to tell her to stay, but he had no right. He was the one who had written the rules. "I understand," he said, his voice rough. Leaving the apartment felt like pulling a piece of herself off. She returned to her old, simple apartment, which her mother had been taking care of. The bills were gone. Her mother's health was safe. The practical reasons for the agreement were done, but her life, which should have felt free and light, now felt empty and without color. The quiet in her small apartment was a deep, empty pain, a great difference from the full, important quiet she had shared with Henry. Henry, meanwhile, was lost in his own cold, empty fort. The apartment, once his safe place of order and control, was now a statue showing his failure. Her being gone was something he could almost feel, an emptiness in every room. He would walk past her door and feel a sudden, sharp pain of loss, like a hit to his body. He had built a world to protect himself from feelings, and now he was sinking in them. He had lost. He had tried to control love, and love had broken his perfect, reasonable world. A week after Emily left, his mother, Eleanor, arrived at the apartment for their planned weekly dinner. She found him in his office, a glass of liquor in his hand, staring at a blank wall. The house was spotless, but it felt lifeless. "Oh my goodness, Henry," she said, her sharp eyes looking at his messy appearance, the emptiness in his eyes. "You look awful. Where is that girl?" "The Scott girl. She's gone," Henry said, his voice flat. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "I was just starting to like her. She had strength. Unlike that dull cloth air," Eleanor sniffed, her dislike of his past possible partners still strong. "What did you do?" Henry, for the first time in his life, told his mother the full truth. He told her about the agreement, the impossible rule, the kiss, the shared admission, and Emily leaving. Eleanor listened, her face showing nothing. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. He expected a scolding. "I told you this would happen," about the mistake of getting involved with someone from a different world. Instead, she let out a tired sigh. "You, my son," she said, her voice surprisingly soft, "are a very smart, very stupid person." She stood up and walked over to him. "You make a silly rule that hurts yourself just to protect you from getting hurt. And when you finally find a woman with the strength and goodness to actually break through it, you let her leave because of that rule. Of all the silly, unreasonable things you have ever done, this is the most stupid." Henry stared at her, shocked. His mother, the powerful older woman who had planned his social life very strictly, the woman who had pushed him toward suitable partners, was taking Emily's side. She patted his cheek, a rare sign of warmth. "I don't know what silly agreement you two had, but I know what I saw. That girl looks at you like you put the moon in the sky. And you, my son, haven't looked this lively, this human, since before your father died. Now stop being sad and go fix the problem you made." With that, she turned and left him alone in the office. Her words, the most unexpected good thing, the most surprising support, were like a key turning in a lock he didn't even know was there. A few minutes later, Eleanor, from the private space of her car, made a phone call. "Emily, my dear," she said, her voice warm and secretive. "It's Eleanor Montgomery. I really hope I'm not bothering you. I'm calling because my son is being stupid, and I think you are the only one who can fix him." Eleanor's phone call left Emily shocked. The woman she had seen as a powerful, judging problem had just become her most surprising helper. The talk was short, but Eleanor's message was clear. "My son is very unhappy without you. Go get him." But Emily knew it wasn't her turn to act. She had admitted her feelings. She had shown him her heart. The next step, if there was going to be one, had to come from him. He had to be the one to choose to break his own rules, to step out of his fort of reason and into the messy, unsure world of real feeling. Meanwhile, Henry was a man completely changed. His mother's words had taken away his last shield, the cold, hard reason of the agreement. He had followed his own rules exactly, and they had led him to this empty, quiet, bad place. He had won the fight for control, but had lost the war for happiness. He thought about Emily. He thought about her strong faithfulness when his ex-wife's book came out. He thought about her laughter in Florence. He thought about the look in her eyes when she had admitted her love for him, a look of such deep, scary honesty. He realized that his whole life had been about making risks smaller, controlling factors, protecting himself. But the biggest risk, he now understood, was not in loving and getting hurt. The greatest risk was in never loving at all. He couldn't stand the quiet of the apartment for another second. He grabbed his car keys and drove without knowing where he was going. He found himself an hour later parked across the street from the small, simple diner where he had first shown her the agreement. He watched the waitresses moving quickly inside, the steam making the windows cloudy. It felt like forever ago. He saw her. She was sitting alone at a small table by the window, holding a cup of coffee carefully in her hands, staring out at the street with a sad, far-off look in her eyes. She looked beautiful and delicate, and completely too far away. For a long moment he just sat there, his heart beating fast. He was scared. He, Dr. Henry Montgomery, who could hold a human brain in his hands without shaking, was scared of walking across the street and speaking to a waitress. Taking a deep breath, he got out of the car. He walked into the diner, the bell above the door ringing, telling everyone he was there just as it had before. She looked up, and her eyes got big in surprise. He walked to her table and sat down in the chair across from her. He didn't speak, just looked at her, taking in how she looked, remembering the shape of her lips, the smartness in her eyes. "You were right," he said finally, his voice rough and quiet. "I was silly. I built a fort of ice around myself to protect me from a pain that happened years ago, and I didn't even know I was slowly freezing inside it." He reached across the table, his hand floating over hers, not brave enough to touch her without asking. "And then you came along. You didn't try to break down the walls. You just brought so much warmth and light that you melted them from the inside out. I'm scared, Emily. I'm scared of feeling this much for someone. But I've learned in the last week that I'm much more scared of the thought of living the rest of my life without you." He slid a paper across the table. It wasn't an agreement. It was a single, best-level, no-fixed-date plane ticket to anywhere in the world. "You are free, Emily," he said, his voice heavy with a feeling he no longer tried to hide. "Truly free. The money set aside for your mother's care cannot be taken back. It's safe for her whole life, no matter what. You don't owe me anything. You can take this ticket and you can go anywhere, be anyone, build any life you want, and I will never bother you again." He looked at her, showing all his heart in his eyes. "But I hope," he whispered, his voice cracking, "that you choose to stay. I hope you choose me." He stood up, his chair making a loud noise against the floor. He didn't wait for her answer. He couldn't. He had put his heart, his hope, and his weakness on the table. He had given her the greatest choice with no hidden things, no rules, no requirements. He turned and walked out of the diner, leaving her alone with the ticket to anywhere, and the quiet question of whether her world was still with him. Emily sat in the quiet diner. The soft talking and the sound of forks hitting plates became a far-off buzz. The only thing that felt real was the plane ticket resting on the table in front of her. It was a small piece of paper that meant total freedom. Paris, Rome, Tokyo, a new life, a fresh start, a chance to be the artist she had always dreamed of being with no bills, no worries, no ties to people. It was everything she should have wanted. But as she looked at it, she didn't feel a sudden rush of excitement. She felt a deep, empty pain. A world without Henry in it, no matter how beautiful or interesting, felt like a world in black and white. He was the color. He was the warmth. He was the crazy, scary, beautiful factor that made her feel alive. She thought of his face when he had begged her. The deep weakness, the fear, the hope. He had given her the greatest gift, a choice with no hidden requirements. He had finally truly trusted her. She didn't need to think. Her heart had already made its choice weeks ago. She left the ticket on the table, a quiet gift to a life she no longer wanted, and walked out of the diner. Henry was in his office, walking back and forth like a trapped animal. He had been staring at his phone for an hour, waiting, hoping, afraid. He had used his last chance, and now he had no more things he could do. He was completely, totally weak. He heard the soft sound of his private lift arriving at the apartment floor. His heart stopped. He stood still, barely breathing, listening to the soft footsteps coming closer to his office. The door opened. It was Emily. She stood in the doorway, her face calm and sure. She didn't say a word. She walked to his desk, where a picture of his parents sat in a frame. She picked it up, then walked to the bar where the open plane ticket lay. She put the ticket on the bar, then walked to the large, strange painting on the wall. "What are you doing?" he finally asked, his voice very quiet. "I'm changing the decorations," she said simply. She walked back to him, stopping just a few feet away. "I don't want a ticket to the world, Henry," she said, her voice soft, but sounding with a strength that filled the huge room. "I already have my world." She took a step closer. "It's here with you." The relief that flooded his face was so deep. It was like watching a statue suddenly become real. He crossed the space between them in one quick step, his hands coming up to hold her face as if to be sure she was real. "I thought I'd lost you," he breathed, his forehead resting against hers. "Never," she whispered, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the fast, relieved beating of his heart. "You just had to come and find me." He pulled her into a hug, a desperate, complete embrace that was not about strong love, but about coming home. It was the first time they had held each other, without the feeling of the agreement hanging over them, without rules, without fear. It was just them. "I love you, Emily," he said, his voice heavy with feeling, quieted by her hair. "I love you, Henry," she answered, her voice full of a happiness so true it brought tears to her eyes. They had found their way back to each other, not by following the rules, but by being brave enough to break them. Hey dear, are you enjoying this story? Don't forget to click subscribe and help us grow. Thank you for being here. The weeks that came after showed them a new truth, living together without the heavy, stifling feeling of the agreement. They found the simple, beautiful flow of being a real couple. They learned each other's routines, the way he always left his coffee cup on the edge of the counter, the way she sang softly when she was drawing. They had talks late at night that had nothing to do with being seen in public and everything to do with what they hoped for, what they were afraid of, and their future together. Henry, for his part, was a man completely changed. The cold, businesslike doctor was replaced by a warm, caring partner. He would come home from the hospital, and the first thing he would do was find her. His smile was real, his eyes full of a love he no longer tried to hide. He took a real interest in her art, turning one of the apartment's extra rooms into a beautiful, bright studio for her without her even having to ask. One evening, about a month after she had returned, he came home with a secret smile on his face. "Put on something nice," he said, his eyes shining with a secret. "We have a table saved." "A table saved where?" she asked, interested. "You'll see," was all he would say. He took her back to the fancy Maine hotel, the place where their strange, complex story had begun. But he didn't take her to the grand ballroom. Instead, he took her up a private lift to an amazing rooftop balcony that had been closed to other people for the night. The balcony was empty, except for one table set for two, surrounded by hundreds of little candles. In the corner, one cellist was playing the same soft, old music that had been playing the night of the wedding. "Henry, what is all this?" Emily breathed, feeling completely shocked. "This is where we had our first fake moment," he said, taking her hands in his. "I wanted our first real one to be here, too." He looked at her, his gray eyes, once so cold and thinking, now filled with a warmth and a love so deep it made her heart hurt. "Our agreement is finished." "Emily," he began, his voice low and serious, "but I find myself wanting to suggest a new one, a permanent one." He slowly got down on one knee. The super-rich brain surgeon, the man who gave orders in big business meetings and operating rooms, was kneeling before her under the stars. He pulled a small, soft box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple, lovely diamond ring that sparkled in the candlelight. It wasn't a showy, over-the-top stone. It was nice, classic, and perfect. "Emily Scott," he said, his voice heavy with a feeling he made no attempt to hide. "You came into my life as a factor I couldn't control, and you became the only thing I can't live without. You taught me that a life without risk is a life without fun, and a heart without love is just a body part. Our first agreement had an impossible rule. I want to make you a new one with no rules, no requirements, no end date." He looked up at her, showing all his heart in his eyes. "Will you marry me, Emily? For real this time?" Tears of pure, real joy ran down her face. She was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes," she whispered, her voice tight with happiness. "Yes, of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. He stood up, pulling her into his arms and kissing her. A deep, loving kiss that held the promise of forever. It was a kiss that finished their new and final deal. 1 year later, Emily stood in that same sunny garden where she had once felt like she didn't belong. But this time, she was the bride, and the happiness was real. Their wedding was a small, beautiful party, attended only by their closest friends and family. Emily's mother, her face shining with health and happiness, sat in the front row, crying openly. Eleanor Montgomery sat next to her, patting her hand in a sign of shared motherly pride, a rare, real smile on her own face. As Emily walked down the aisle, she only looked at Henry. He stood waiting for her, not with the cool, separate look of a man acting, but with an open, loving face that was meant only for her. The love in his eyes was a force you could feel, a warm, bright light. Their promises were simple, true, and very personal, filled with inside jokes and promises that held the importance of their special trip together. Later at the party, as the sun began to go down, throwing a golden light over the happy guests, Henry pulled her away for a quiet moment. They stood by the same fountain where they had first seen each other across a crowded room. "I have something for you," he said, a playful shine in his eye. He reached into the pocket of his suit and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It was a small paper square from the hotel bar. "Our final agreement," he said, giving it to her. She opened it. On it, he had written one sentence in his sharp, clear handwriting. The final rule: Party A, Henry, and Party B, Emily, agree right. Now to break the rule about ending the deal if feelings start, happily and very strongly, every single day for the rest of their lives. Below it were 2 lines for signing names. Emily laughed, a sound of pure, real happiness that bounced back in the fading light. "This is the best agreement you've ever written," she said. He took out a pen from his pocket. "Should we make it official?" They leaned against the fountain, using the cool stone as a temporary desk, and signed their names on the napkin. He took it from her, folded it carefully, and put it back in his pocket close to his heart. "This lasts for a lifetime," he said, his voice full of a love so deep it had no end. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, a slow, sweet kiss that held all the promises of their future. Their story had started with a lie whispered in a crowded room, a game of pretend with rules that couldn't be kept. But it had ended here with a truth written on a napkin, a sign of the beautiful, certain fact that the best rules are the ones that are broken by love. And that's the end of today's story, my dear. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to click subscribe, leave a comment telling me what you thought, and share it with a friend. Thank you for keeping me company. See you in the next story.